A new Undercity coming, but completely different, more than a revamp. Yeah, what? I've talked about the Undercity coming back, and I've actually talked about my hopes that they actually bring Lordaeron back. I've said they can keep the Undercity for the Horde, but rebuild Lordaeron and make it a cross-faction city so we can actually see Lordaeron realized in-game for once. It's my favorite city. I'd love to see it. But let's see what Doran, the Truth Teller, has found about the Undercity and what might happen to it.
Undercity is almost certainly never coming back, so you can forget the sewers and the green rivers, but instead, the Forsaken had not only embraced a new emblem of Lordaeron and discarded the Sylvanas one, but they had proclaimed they're done living in the ruins and hiding from the world. Conveniently, at the same time, we had just data mined and repopulated Gilneas with workers rebuilding, which seems at this point to 100% be an Alliance city, and it seems like a setup for a big revamp in Midnight when all this content is relevant.
I can't see Gilneas becoming cross-faction. I do think it'll remain an Alliance city. All these new cities, some of them are going cross-faction, but I don't think all of them are going to. There'll still be cities that are just for
Lordaeron has been cleared and secured in the past 2 expansions.
Unless it makes sense to go cross-faction.
The Forsaken are going to be rebuilding a new Lordaeron in Midnight as well as a Horde-only zone. We might be in for a huge undead capital unlike anything we had ever seen about the ground. So what exactly is this new Undercity or above city?
If
you guys want to buy Total War,
I hope they bring back
any other
Lordaeron,
game,
man.
you can get them at great prices
with
my Amiibo link. You can also get
Horde.
anything Warcraft related, gift cards and software, and all below market prices. Best of all, if you add my code DORON, you can get an even bigger discount. So make sure you check out my link in the description and get some amazing deals.
Like I said, you can go cross-faction if it makes sense. And literally, the undead have Kalia Menethil, who's still Alliance aligned, sitting on their board of trustees or whatever the hell they call that shit. So it would make sense that the Alliance would be allowed to come back to Lordaeron, to me.
You must have heard about the Gilneas revamp that is happening in 10.2.5, which should be on the live servers any day now. However, there is new info on what is happening, and it isn't really a massive revamp, or it isn't as exciting at the moment as we had initially thought, but honestly, this is 100% an expected scenario. We deal with the Scarlet Crusade, we have data mined that repopulated Gilneas with a whole bunch of NPCs just a few days back. What is interesting, or not so interesting, is that the city is not actually revamped. I mean, it looks about exactly the same, just it is not a wasteland with no one around, there are no Forsaken, and there are no siege equipment like everywhere.
I will say one thing about Gilneas, it doesn't look bad or scuffed in any way. That was a pretty well done city. It was highly detailed when they put it into the game. Maybe it doesn't need a revamp, but I would like to see maybe, like, you know, I think they would have an inn. I guess they wouldn't put a bank or an auction house or anything, but those things would be cool. That'd really make it feel like a city that you can actually sit in and live in. Remember, this is an in-between patch, and we're going to retake Gilneas. We're getting a new hub city for a 0.5 patch, or 0.7. That's pretty crazy.
And all this war stuff. However, don't take this the wrong way right now. It doesn't mean that no revamp will be happening.
They have been doing really good at hiding stuff from data miners, so that could be the case.
It won't be happening yet, and that this is just a setup. Why I think it is a setup is for 2 reasons. First is that alongside the NPCs, there are a whole ton of Gilneas workers building and actually working with working animations, and all this really seems like this is...
Another thing Blizzard has been doing is this too, where they have like progressive advancements of cities. So I talked a lot about Belemeth and how I feel like it doesn't feel like a city yet. It's just some huts under a tree. But Blizzard has indicated that over time that city will advance. It'll grow and maybe one day become more like Darnassus, where there's it feels like a lived-in city. There's buildings everywhere. So Gilneas could be the same way. You know, they could have these workers, and part of the lore is they're building out, you know, Gilneas. So that way it's an actual city going forward.
And all this really seems like this is content that will happen at Midnight. I mean, let's be real. What is the point of building and revamping the whole city right now in Dragonflight? So that we can just go west up in the area in the War Within, and nothing will be happening in this area. So all of this is a setup for the next expansion. Now, what I'm talking about Gilneas in regards to Undercity and Lordaeron is that this is literally just the Alliance version of what is going to be happening to Undercity in Midnight as well. And let me explain to you why, because I think this could be one of the most exciting news. So, with the entire debacle of the new Night Elven capital being neutral or like half neutral and officially being a sanctuary, the good news is that by all accounts, Gilneas seems to be entirely hostile towards the Horde. The PTR shows that the Horde is helping in this questline and all, but everything is pointing at this being a strictly aligned city. This, if really is the case, in turn means that Undercity, which is right next door, is going to be a strictly Horde city. So this...
It could be. I could still see Undercity being strictly a Horde city, but I would hope that they add... they rebuild Lordaeron on top of the Undercity. So I would be perfectly fine with, like, Lordaeron being the hub for some point in any expansion, whatever. And everyone can go to Lordaeron, but then only the Horde could go under Lordaeron to the Undercity. That would be fine, because then the Horde are not losing a city, technically, but the entire game is gaining Lordaeron, which would be a huge gain for the game.
Neutral thing is not going to be happening to everything. However, other dialogue options are showing that very likely Undercity is never coming back in the form that it was, and that Lordaeron really is coming back, but never again as a human kingdom, and that the dream of the Alliance rebuilding Lordaeron in this huge crusade is really dead, but a new Lordaeron 2.0 will be happening, and let me tell you why I think this really is the case. So if you remember the ending of Shadowlands, there was a huge questline where we are clearing the plague and we made the ruins of Lordaeron technically habitable. That was essentially part 1. Part 2 was dealing with the Scarlet Crusade and the new Forsaken Heritage questline in Dragonfight, and they're getting a new identity, dealing with some loose ends. And part 3 will almost certainly be happening in Midnight, and this will be like the actual big thing, like this big reveal, not just a simple Heritage questline. In turn, the Gilneas thing is literally these two parts, reclamation and clearing in one single part, while the third and the final part will almost certainly happen in Midnight together with Undercity. This is why they set up the workers, and obvious, I mean, Gilneas can't be rebuilt overnight after it has been in ruins for over a decade. It will take quite a few years, which should be really by the time of Midnight release. The exact same thing can be said for Undercity as well. I mean, it has been plagued and entirely destroyed in the war, and remember, I mean, these were already ruins to begin with, so it will take a few years as well, which means Midnight. So first and the most important thing is that...
The one thing about Midnight, though, the reason why I don't know if they would do a Lordaeron rebuild in that expansion is we're getting a Silvermoon rebuild. That's like basically confirmed at this point, and I'm sure they're going to make Silvermoon cross-faction, because now with the High Elves / Void Elves on the Alliance and the Blood Elves on the Horde, you essentially have High Elves on both sides of the faction divide. So I think they're just going to revamp Silvermoon and make it a cross-faction city.
That in an interview, Blizzard told us that the revamp of Quel'Thalas will be huge. And I mean literally huge, as in they will make the zones larger, and they will also no longer be instant, so you gotta go through a portal. By messing with this...
I mean, it's literally the story of Midnight, as Chris Metzen described, is the reuniting of the Elven tribes, so...
Everything seamless and changing the structure. This will without a doubt impact the other zones as well. You know, the Plague Lands are all but restored by this point. Stormguards is super relevant and entirely rebuilt in the lore. Undercity is relevant, so my guess is that we are getting a revamp of the entire northern part of the continent up to around this line of the continent, the northern part of the Eastern Kingdoms. It 100% makes sense because the entire expansion will likely be focused just on one continent, and I really don't think Quel'Thalas alone is big enough to be entire expansion content. This means these Gilneas and Undercity questlines were just set up for a future expansion, and we might also get small updates like these, maybe even throughout the War Within. Second, and super important thing to keep in mind as well, if you have followed the Forsaken Heritage questline, it wasn't really about dealing with the Scarlet Crusade, as it was like this huge, insane threat, but the entire point of the questline was for the Forsaken to claim a new identity. You might have noticed that the Forsaken are wearing this red armor with a sign of Lordaeron, like a blood Lordaeron flag, which is essentially they rebranding themselves. However, one of the dialogue options, in my opinion, was like the biggest foreshadowing we had gotten so far. The entire premise of it was that the Forsaken proclaim they are the citizens of Lordaeron. They will no longer be living in the ruins and the sewers like rats, hiding from the world. And if that is not foreshadowing for a new city, I really don't know what is. And when I say Undercity, I mean just city most likely, as the Forsaken have been living in literal sewers of a ruin of a city they used to live in the past when they were alive.
I want to see Lordaeron Lordaeron, man. I want to see Lordaeron realized in game. It's such an epic city. We've only ever
just
seen
remember,
it in cinematic.
Undercity is all entirely under the ground in these disgusting sludge rivers, and it must have been the worst city ever to be around in. Like, you would only live there if you had to. Also,
Lordaeron
keep in
was
mind,
the
I mean,
shit,
their
yes.
identity has changed 180 degrees. Back in the day, when they used to live in these sewers, their tabard and banner was like this tormented face of Sylvanas. Everything in their culture was about Sylvanas. All the gods mentioned Sylvanas. She was like their god. Their entire deal, hence the name Forsaken, was that they have no place in this world, they're abominations,
Yeah,
they
all that's
only stick
changed
for
now.
themselves, and they trust no one. This is why they're hiding underground beneath the ruins where no one wants to go to. They're threatened by all the living, by the Lich King, by the entirety of the Alliance. Everyone is an enemy. However, since
If you remember too, Chris Metzen did mention going back to Northrend. I could totally see like a Calia Menethil storyline or something. Part of the rebuilding of Lordaeron is going back to Northrend for some reason, whatever that is. Because, you know, Arthas will forever be attached to Lordaeron. That makes sense. And the rebuilding of the city. It has to happen, man.
so much has changed. I mean, they got rid of Sylvanas, they
Rebuilding what her
abandoned
brother
their
tore down,
cruel
yeah.
ways of developing super plague weapons, they defeated the Lich King, they finally defeated their ultimate local enemy, the Scout Crusade, the final enemy that threatened them, therefore embracing the symbol of Lordaeron freely, proclaiming that they are, in fact, New Lordaeron. Now, if they really are New Lordaeron and
Sins
are
of the
no
Father,
longer
yeah.
hiding, why exactly would they continue to live in the sewers and hide from the world? First of all, they helped in the return of Gilneas, therefore they now have an ally right next door. On the other hand, they got their allies north with the elves, and really, they're no longer living in this world that is like this free-for-all and everyone is like fending for themselves. So there is no
Sure.
reason that they need to live under a city. The Forsaken don't need to hide from anyone and live in the ruins of their former homes, but instead, with their new council and identity, they will create a new home. I mean, when you think about it, it makes total sense. There is no
It does.
reason to go back to the way it was. This is why I think the entire sewer system may just be used for storage or something, and in fact, they might just demolish the entirety of the ruins of the capital city, as really, by this point, I mean, they must be in terrible shape
No,
after the
man, don't demolish them. Rebuild them. Rebuild them. Look at these walls with these lion heads on them and every. I would love to see this just all come back. Even the throne room, like repolish that shit, right? Don't completely destroy the Lordaeron throne room. Oh man, because it looks so good already, and it's so iconic, right? Like the Lordaeron throne room. Look at this thing. Look at how good that looks, man. You don't have to completely wreck this thing. I mean, it's already in game. It's an in-game asset. Just repolish it and make it look pretty again. What is this with the slime? This is something someone. Oh, this is a Sylvanas like remake of it. Yeah, but the Lordaeron throne. This is how it is in game right now. I mean, you could totally use this. Use this, revamp this, polish those floors, make it look nice, and you don't have to put Calia Menethil on the throne. But this is an epic place, man. I wouldn't want to see all this destroyed. I just want to see it brought back.
I mean, they must be in terrible shape after the plague, and instead, they're going to build a new settlement that will probably be styled in this, like, red Lordaeron type emblem. So, probably not those dark, spiky bases that they usually build, but something that seems habitable, like an actual city, but with a Forsaken theme, which I think might be entirely exciting, as this is something Blizzard had never actually built for the undead. I'm personally expecting a brand new name, like how the Night Elves got Belamet, or maybe it might just be known strictly as Lordaeron.
You cannot rename it. It's got to be Lordaeron. What a shit move that would be. If they did that.
Reclaiming their old home. Furthermore, we can also determine their Sylvanas outfit, and we also had that cringe Sylvanas dialogue back with the quest lines that talk about her very likely coming back, which I can't say I'm a fan of, but with the elves and the new attack on Quota Last in Midnight, I'm like 99% certain some version of Sylvanas will be coming back in this expansion, and we could expect the Forsaken to also get involved in this entire thing. However, Sylvanas aside, I also expect the Forsaken to be a pretty important part of Midnight as well, potentially getting void attacks on their new settlement throughout the entire expansion. Thank you for watching. Check out Zealot's crazy plan on how she's collecting old gods literally under our nose by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on ancient colonies in Spain by also clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.
Yeah, no, great stuff from Doran. Here's the thing. I think you can do both. You can keep the Undercity and rebuild Lordaeron. Keep the Undercity as a horde city, rebuild Lordaeron as a cross-faction city. Problem solved. And suddenly, finally being able to realize the most epic, lore-based, cinematic-based, amazing city in the entire game for the first time ever. God, I'd love to see Lordaeron.